we're going to be talking about the trends that are disrupting finance and what we can do about them. And one of the themes that I think Larry just touched on and that Chris Dolan and I were discussing last night is this theme of resilience. I mean, I think it's incredible that in basically a year, we suddenly have these little cartridges mass-produced in everyone's hands to be able to do self-testing. So I didn't find the self-test in my room annoying. I found it exciting as a symbol of humanity's resilience and innovation in the face of change and adversity. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit about new money. We're going to talk about decentralization versus platforms, which, in its ideal state could be something like King Kong versus Godzilla, but right now it's not quite there. We'll talk about how we scale innovation. And I'm going to try and wrap up, and Larry really, emphasized to me the importance of, while we're doing all this cool stuff around DeFi and decentralized ledgers and AI and innovation, that we remember the human factor at the center of what we're doing. One of the things that I have enjoyed about spending most of my innovation career in places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, and New York City, and in London, is that these are all places that not only look inward, but they look outward. They look at the role of humanity in technology and technology in humanity. Some other clusters of innovation who shall remain nameless sometimes lose sight of that, but we are not going to do that. We are going to remember the importance of the human factor. In fact, I think the future is so bright, I have to wear shades. I don't know, how many of you are feeling like 2022 is going to be an even better year than 2021? I agree. I mean, despite everyone saying COVID's the end of society as we know it, the last 2 years have been some of the best years of my career and some of the most exciting years of thinking about the future. The one thing I've missed is gatherings like this one. The opportunity to come together with people who are trying to invent a brighter tomorrow and really workshop it. So, new money, right? China has launched the digital RMB. A pilot consists of 100 million people in 5 cities. All right, that's just the pilot that they did. All right, we're going to pose the provocation number 1 to start keeping our heads as we think through the next few days. What does the world look like when US dollar hegemony is not the law of the land? Mark Carney said, we don't want digital RMB, we need something else. It's not going to be Bitcoin, it's going to be some federated thing. I think that's actually an interesting idea. The question is, how do we make it happen? Colleagues of mine I spent a lot of time with, Alex Lipton and Sandy Pentland, proposed a trade coin, a decentralized DeFi that is balanced across many nations. And that's an exciting idea. If you're curious about it, they were the cover of Scientific American a couple of years ago, breaking the bank. When I talk to people and I say, and I've been doing some work with Bitcoin, this is the reaction I get from a lot of people in traditional finance. They say, you're one of those people. But I think it's incredible that in, a little over a decade, we've created $2.6 trillion of something out of nothing. This is something I have discovered classically trained economists get very upset about. A colleague of mine from Oxford at one point just threw up his hands and said, I'm not going to waste my time debating Bitcoin with a non-academic, since Imperial College is obviously not Oxford. But I had there are others at Oxford who I had a fantastic set of collaborations with. But what I have found is, and some of them really embraced the future, and some of them, like this particular Oxford Don, got very emotional about not just money, like digital money. Like, why are you getting so emotional? Well, because this new thing that now is nominally worth $2.6 trillion doesn't fit with his classic economic textbooks. He doesn't understand it. When people get really emotional about something, that's when I've discovered innovation is happening. And what I've found with DeFi is that people that I talk to get more emotional about this stuff than any other disruptive technology I've looked at in 25 years. I think they should be more worried about AI, but no, they're really worried about Dogecoin destroying the firmament. And so it sort of raises the question of, all right, we've got all this decentralization and we're like reshaping power bases, but what happens when the corporocratic state wakes up and says, ooh, power's shifting, I want some of that? You get things like Libra, which quickly renamed itself Diem as soon as everyone said that's the worst idea ever. Facebook, the people who blew cybersecurity on personal passwords and personal data for 2.4 billion people will now also be in charge of your money. Every year it seems like there's another 500 million user Facebook hack. And the culture there, the ethics of Facebook, which I've written on many times, are actually what's motivated me to spend more time on technology ethics. Because Diem and Meta and they're starting to co-opt academia in bringing people into this vision, this dystopian future that Meta and Diem want to create around the money system. And I think we need to create other systems that can fight back against this. Because the metaverse is coming for you. I'm not alone in thinking Facebook has done terrible things to us. No less than SPAC god Chamath is saying that he feels incredibly guilty over having destroyed the fabric of society. AI is the thing I actually am even more worried about, though. And do we need a cleanup? No? Okay. Oh, okay, good. I was worried I was bombing. So, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about AI. I wrote my first AI software program in 1991, and it wasn't very useful back then. In fact, it's only really started getting useful within like the last 5 to 7 years, right? Because at some point, even with machine learning, which was invented in the 80s, it would get better the more data you poured into it, up to a point, and then it would plateau. But with deep learning systems, the more data you pour in, the better they get. And suddenly, a whole bunch of things are happening. Among other things, in financial services, it is believed that 30 to 50% of jobs will be lost within the next 5 to 7 years. Those are the official published numbers. But the last time the World Economic Forum met in person in Davos in 2020, people were whispering in the hallways that it's really going to be more like 99% unemployment, which is why I had that little Wall-E image at the front of the deck, because I invite you to think, what does the future look like if the AIs do everything and 99% of the people in the world can't work? And how do we create a future that looks different than that? I mean, let's look at challengers, right? Digital challengers are 50% less expensive to build and require 90% fewer people to run, which is why I say, when someone says, well, financial services jobs lost 30%, I look at them and I say, I'm working off of a different set of math than you are. So the question is, are we destined to have this Skynet future where the AIs take over, or can we do something about it? How do we design AI systems that are actually responsible, and for that matter, more broadly, tech systems that are responsible and ethical? So some colleagues who are forward-thinking at Oxford, the Oxford Internet Institute, Luciano Floridi, has done some incredible work looking at common values and ethics around technology. And he's come up with 5 pillars, having looked at the ethical principles of 42 countries that are shared values. Yes, different countries have different particular values they think about. A good friend of mine wrote a book called The Values Compass that kind of looks at many, many different countries and says this is the value that's important to that country, over 100 countries. But it turns out that there are 5 shared values that we can think about. Like, this technology that we're creating and adopting should do something good. It should be benevolent. And when it's doing something good, it should not do something bad. So for example, when my AI trading system increases my retirement fund, which is good for me at least, I get to live a nice life, it should not do so by, speculating on the price of rice so poor people starve. Autonomy, right? The AI should do what we want them to do, and tech should do what we want it to do. It should not go off and do things that we don't expect it to do. It should incorporate concepts of justice and fairness into its programming. And finally, if these machines are helping us make decisions, or maybe they're making decisions for us about who gets loans or who gets to apply for a job, they should be able to explain how they arrived at a decision. And I can share the link to this article. It's open access. It's in the Harvard Data Science Review that MIT Press publishes. So we kind of know what is the right thing. We've sort of figured that out. And the issue is then, how do we get human systems to start doing the right thing? Why, if it's not actually difficult to figure out what 42 countries agree on for ethical values, is it so hard to get corporations and countries and ecosystems to all move in the same direction? So I'm going to do a little provocation for 2 minutes and invite you to turn to your neighbor, thinking about a project you're working on right now. Change is coming to financial services. I think we can all agree on that. A little context for the revolution. So this is the MIT Media Lab. I spent a few years there. And what's interesting is the MIT Media Lab got started in the 1980s by a bunch of traditional newspaper publishers and other old school media companies. Think about that. The people who invented the Amazon Kindle were old school publishers. Right? The e-ink technology that makes the Kindle go was invented here and paid for by traditional publishing houses. They saw it coming. In the 1980s, they were talking about touchscreen displays. In the early 90s, touchscreen displays and gestural interfaces and all the things we take for granted today that are mostly capitalized on by people who are not traditional publishing companies. They waited too long to respond to digital disruption. By the time they realized that Google, for example, had taken away all of their ad revenue, it was too late. Once you're at that intersection point in the curve where Google has more ad sales than the newspaper industry, it's too late to do much about it. Look at the market cap of the entire news industry and look at the market cap of Google. Most of Google's money and profit today is still made off of click arbitrage of those little 3-sentence ads that used to be the old classified ad at the back of the newspaper. So, as a former CTO of mine once said, you can't fight the wave, but you can learn to surf. Financial services companies around the world that I see that are doing a pretty good job of surfing include BlackRock and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Certainly compared to their peers. You know the old joke, you don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the other guy outrunning the bear. Here in Spain, I run into BBVA a lot in these innovation discussions, occasionally Santander, but a lot to BBVA. And so it's worth kind of looking at their model of how they think about this. I asked the question, though, around human systems. So I go back to the original problem of, we've invented the technology years ago. The technology behind Bitcoin was invented 30 years prior to 2008 when it was actually first sort of put together in a white paper. Right? The issue is human scale adoption and getting human systems to change. And what's really interesting is this question of what if we could use some of these disruptive technologies like AI, like decentralized governance and blockchain, to actually change the human systems. And what happens when you do that? So the world's best chess player is not IBM Watson, and it's not Magnus Carlsen, but it's a mid-ranked human player and a really good AI. And if you put those things together of AI and people, if you put technology and people together in the right kind of systems, this was a project Sandy Pentland and I put together at MIT using my students from my online Fintech class. We were able to predict the S&P's closing price within 0.1% a month in advance during the month that Brexit was voted on. That was an interesting prediction. We can use AI to actually teach people about AI and Fintech faster. The pace of technology change is getting faster and faster, and we have to keep up with it. We can do things like we can take blockchain and AI and put them together to create a new kind of catastrophe bond that gets much-needed aid into the hands of poor farmers much, much more quickly. So what else can we do? So I'm inviting you to consider the post-dollar world, the corporate state versus the decentralized community, how we scale responsible innovation, and how when we bring people and technology together, we can harness collective intelligence to do things that neither people nor AI can do. So at Imperial, we've been putting together work around this. We have a hackathon coming up this weekend. It's virtual. You're welcome to come hack with us. These are my coordinates. So I certainly invite you. My disclosures are listed up on Visionary Future. I do have interests in this space because I believe in not only talking about innovation, but actually doing it. So I have a number of investments in operating companies. But I invite you to say hello over the course of the next few days. I'm looking forward to getting to know many of you better or at all. And thank you so much for your time.